Hello, everyone. Russ of Aquarium Pets here. Can you hear me? How am I sounding? Testing a few things here. Hopefully, this stream will go better from a technical standpoint than it did on Monday. It was a lot of fun visiting with Don's garter snakes, but the coverage from my cell phone was not what we needed it to be. So it came out pixelated. We had audio problems, and we got kicked off the stream. But now I'm doing this landed connection at home, my familiar tech and everything. So I don't think it's going to be a problem. Hopefully not. Mariah of Reptifiles is going to be joining us very soon. Just got a message. She's a little bit detained, but it will be here for the stream in just a few minutes. So no problem there. We'll just have a chance to kind of chat for a few minutes until she shows up. So I'll just keep an eye on the green room and make sure that when she gets here, we'll let her join the stream. For those of you who may not have heard, we got the garter snakes sexed, 24 females, 21 males. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those have gone to their new homes already locally. Local pickups usually come first. And then we have the first ship date going out is the 11th, and then we're going to do the 25th as well. So welcome. I see we have Frank the Tank, Invertebrate Person. Let's see who else is in here. Laura Taylor and LF so far. Possibly some others. I can't tell how many people, or I can't tell everybody's in the stream. Looks like we have about 10 people in the stream so far. And welcome to one and all. Oh, nope, we got 14 people in the stream. It's coming quickly. The numbers are increasing. So hopefully you don't hear the airplanes flying over. If you do, let me know. It would be helpful for me to know if you are hearing it, because then I can temporarily mute myself when the airplane comes by if it's too overwhelming, so to speak. Oh, yes. Thank you, Laura Taylor, for bringing up the like button. The more people click the like button, the more people will see in the stream. So that's helpful. It gets the word out there. It tells the algorithm that other people want to see the stream. There's Joseph Tavir. Great to see you here. This is a great time for questions. Anybody, if you want to bring them up, because we've got a few extra minutes before Mariah gets here. So let's see what's going on lately. There's so many things going on. It's crazy busy. Next week, I will be teaching a week-long, 3-hour per day insect, and not just insects, it's arthropods. Arthropod camp for 6 to 8-year-olds. University asked me to do that, so I'm excited to be doing that. Going to bring all sorts of fun critters for them, and we're going to do bug-related crafts. We're going to have hands-on experience with all kinds of bugs. They're going to learn the difference between holometabolous and hemimetabolous insects, and the difference between arachnids and insects, and how to define an arthropod, and all this kind of stuff. I see that Ian Alicia has joined. Casey has joined. Amber Butler, welcome back. Great to see you all here. Got about 14 people. It's been fluctuating a little bit, but we've got 14 people in the stream, so that's fun. I've noticed that in other news, my milkweed assassin bugs doing pretty well. I got some nymphs from, and they were like, I don't know, L3, L4 or something like that, nymphs from Roach Crossing. I don't know exactly how old they were, but at what stage of maturity they were at. But they matured out and laid eggs, and a lot of the eggs have hatched, and now I have babies at about the size that I got them. So that was fun. So LF, I am an educator at the university, but not in the field of entomology or herpetology. But I do a lot of things like that. The university knows that I do those things and are happy to have me do things like that sometimes. Least favorite arthropod? My least favorite arthropod? Not a huge fan of mosquitoes, although I like to use mosquito larvae to feed fish. Hard to say. Again, houseflies, not great, although there are types of houseflies that are useful feeders. And Casey, I do talk about isopods a lot. Any news about isopods lately? I got 3 new morphs of an isopod species that arrived. Was that yesterday? I think it was yesterday. And I will be posting a video about those on Friday. So I've finished editing the unboxing video and demonstrating the 3 different morphs that I have of this isopod. And so check that out on Friday. It should be pretty cool, which is 2 days from now. And I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler, but it relates to the isopods that we talked about when I interviewed Derek Niehaus. So if you saw that interview, the unboxing comes from Derek. It's related to that. Fish and Tanktics, welcome. Good to see you here as well. So you are hearing the plane noises. Okay, sometimes the mics cancel it out, sometimes they don't. We have a lot of planes around here from the Air Force Base. And as you can probably tell, we are right in the flight path. So I will probably mute my mic occasionally, when I have to. That's just to get rid of the worst of it, the audio distortion or whatnot, the interference from the planes flying over. Theropod Hunter, welcome. Good to see you here as well. Oh, it looks like Mariah is here. I'm going to add her to the stage here. Oh, well, she's doing some modifications here. There we go. I'll let her do that for a moment, and then we'll get her added. All right. Let's see. Oh, we got you on screen.
Hi, let me see if I can fix. Aha, I'm no longer upside down. That's good.
That looks good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi, welcome.
Good to be here.
We're glad to have you. We've got quite a few people here to watch.
Woo.
Building up. So Freelance Human Being, welcome too. Let's see, anybody else who I haven't welcomed yet? I think that's everybody so far. So, all right. Well, Mariah, to start out, would you just kind of introduce who you are and what you do in the herpetological community?
Right. So my name is Mariah Healy. I am the author and researcher behind reptifiles.com, and I am a professional reptile husbandry specialist. So I research and I consult. And I've been doing this for about 8 years now. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Reptifiles, Reptifiles is my online database where I publish my research for basically anyone to access and use. It was inspired by anapsid.org, if you're familiar with Melissa Kaplan's work. And this is kind of taking things to the next level, modern information that I am updating as often as I can. And I'm constantly working to build the database. Right now it boasts over 80 care sheets and 19 care manuals. Care sheets are short, roughly 4 to 6 page brief guides to caring for a given species or sometimes a genus. The manuals are a much more thorough, deep dive into the husbandry of the subject. And those are kind of like book length. Short book, but a book.
Still a book, yeah. Yeah, and even 6 to 8 pages, I mean, that's a lot compared to some of the care sheets that are out there.
Yes, 4 was the absolute minimum that I could squeeze everything onto. So it's 2 pages printed front and back, which makes it pretty easy for, veterinary clinics and pet stores to print out if needed. And for me, because I distribute them at reptile expos.
Yeah.
Because it gets expensive printing all of those care sheets.
Oh, yeah.
But it contains the info. It's a lot of the what and not very much of the how or the why, which is the main weakness of them.
But it's still a great starting point to get people oriented with the information they need and where they need to go look to find other.
Yes, especially because it's based on modern research, our modern understanding of the animals so that's a big focus on welfare focused husbandry, where I'm moving away from know what works, and okay, let's look at how do we optimize the animal's welfare in captivity for true thriving as far as we can get it. And that means focusing on natural history based exotic animal husbandry, which is what I'm getting my master's degree in, actually.
Yeah, that's very cool. And is that where are you doing that, if you don't mind me asking?
No problem. It's West Liberty University. I'm studying under Dr. Zach Loafman, who published a paper in, I want to say, 2020 about the natural history-based husbandry for false water cobras. And I kind of saw, I listened to a podcast episode with Animals at Home, Dylan Perrin, and he introduced Dr. Loafman and his paper, which I promptly went and read, because I was so excited, but I was also a little miffed because I was like, "Oh, you're doing what I do, and you're on my turf here, dude." But he was doing on like the more formal academic level. And when I found out that he was leader of this program at West Liberty University, I was so excited, and I got in touch with him on Facebook immediately because that's where he wanted to be contacted, apparently. And my work with Reptifiles actually got me into grad school, which was really nice.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that makes a lot of sense. If they see, here's the proof is in the pudding. I've been doing this, and I obviously have this knowledge and this passion for this. It makes sense that would help. That's awesome.
Yeah. With how hard it is to get into grad school, it was nice to see that this passion project of mine was worth it in that sense.
Right. Exactly. And I love the fact that it's becoming more with the material that you're putting out, with things like Animals at Home, the emphasis on this kind of husbandry where it's not just, hey, this works, I can get these to pump out babies when I do this. It's more about, what do these animals experience in the wild? How can we make it more similar to that? How can we provide the best possible situation rather than this works well enough?
Exactly. That was the situation 20 or so years ago, because we didn't really have the technology. Reptiles were pretty new to the pet hobby at large. And so we were doing what we could with what we had. And, decades ago, that was the big boast. If you could get a species to breed, that meant you were doing something right. And that made breeders the experts for a very long time. And still, I use breeders' information all the time. They are the foundational baseline because they know survival. They know survival very well. And you can't have thriving without survival. So you have to figure out what the essentials of survival first before you can start to extrapolate.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's not wrong that breeders are doing something right if they're breeding, because there are much worse states to be in if you're incapable of breeding, then something.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah,
and that's how we know the species that need the most attention in captivity, species that were struggling to breed. I mean, savanna monitors, for one, there's the argument that they shouldn't be in captivity because we just can't get it right. And then there's, on a much smaller scale, the sandfish. They're really hard to breed. The number of successful cases of breeding these guys in captivity can be counted on one hand, and they're few and far between. So right now, Phil with Arids Only is trying his darndest, and I'm very excited to see how that project pans out.
Yeah, that's. I always love to see how it works out with these species, where someone finally cracks the code and then hopefully releases that information out, disseminates it so that more people can succeed.
Yes.
I think we're seeing that in a lot of areas of the hobby. We see it with invertebrates, we see it with reptiles, amphibians, and so on. Just the more, now that we have a vehicle through the internet to be able to share that, we don't always have the people who want to share it, but when we do, it's
Yeah.
Cool. So that's a little bit about what you do and some of the background and education you're working on and so on. Can you tell us how you just got started with reptiles?
Well, like a lot of people, I was interested in reptiles from a very young age, as well as a lot of exotic animals. Liked frogs, liked bugs, liked lizards and snakes. My first pet lizard was when I was 7. That was the one that was under my care, but my first reptile was much younger, 3 maybe, 3 or 4. And we had a family red-eared slider named Kamikaze because of the way he would dive for the edge of the table whenever my parents got him out to show the kids. And yeah, and then we moved, and he actually went to a friend who, she was my pediatrician, actually, and a family friend. And her house kind of became the template for what I wanted to have when I grew up. There are two things I remember very vividly about her house. One, she had the best Halloween decorations every single year. The whole house was themed Halloween. It was so fun going there. And the second thing was that it was a zoo. I mean, there were just animals everywhere. And she actually did have a sandfish. His name was Wink the skink. And every time we would go over, I'd ask to see Wink, and she would put a pencil in the sand and poke it around until she found him and forced him up onto the surface for me to see. But yeah, so Kamikaze, when we moved across the country, went to her, and he actually ate her African lungfish.
Oh, no.
Yeah, she thought the lungfish would be too big for him, and it was not. So that's all you need to know about red-eared sliders and their appetites, right?
Wow.
But yeah, but he ended up in an outdoor pond on their property, and as far as I know, he might still be living there, honestly.
Yeah, long-lived turtles for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But yeah, so that was my first reptile. That's how I got started. I guess it was a bit of a tangent, huh?
No, that's part of the story.
Yeah, bringing it back, I had a couple of anoles when I was a kid. Then I kind of deviated into a fish phase for a while. So had some aquariums that drove my mom crazy. And I had some frogs. I had a tank full of pound scum, snails, and various invertebrates. And I drove my fourth grade teacher nuts with every sharing time. I always made sure to make a point of sharing updates on my pond scum. And then I actually got back into turtles when I was a teenager. I got another red-eared slider. You see a pattern here. Her name was Mary. And I had her for 1 or 2 years. I worked my tail off one summer to buy her tank and her filter and everything. And eventually my mom got rid of the turtle. So she was sick of the lower level smelling like pond. I thought I did a pretty good job of keeping the tank clean personally. Like it was for what was available to me at the time and what the standards for red-eared slider husbandry were 15 years ago or so. I thought I did a pretty good job. But yeah, so she went back to the pet store, I think. And I didn't have another reptile until my early 20s after I got married. And my husband had bearded dragons growing up, and I'd always wanted a bearded dragon. I'd had a friend that had a bearded dragon. I was so envious. And so then we're like, well, we have our own place. I'm not in a college dorm. Why not? Yeah. So we asked our property manager, and we made like the whole presentation, making sure that, this is not a messy pet. This is a very apartment friendly kind of pet. And it went over very smoothly. And so we ended up getting 2 bearded dragons, actually. They were cohabbed in a 90-gallon terrarium, which we thought we were doing so great because, the standards back, 8 years ago or so were, more like 10 years ago, were, 40-gallon was good.
Right.
And so we thought they'd be fine there. And they'd been previously cohabbed. They'd been kind of raised together with no apparent issues. So, we set them up, and that was kind of where Reptifiles started. Even though I'd had this passion for exotic animal husbandry up to this point, all through my childhood, like I would talk the ears off anybody about, my current pet and what I was learning about them. And I was researching all over the place, napsa.org, cleaning out my local library, all of the websites I could find back then on animal husbandry. And then unfortunately torturing my friends with it. Um, and at the time I was working for a digital marketing agency, and one of the things the perks for the employees was a sandbox website for us to kind of apply the things that we were learning about marketing to our own site so that we could gain a deeper understanding of the topic. Right. And so my sister had a food blog at the time, and not to be outdone, I wanted to try my hand at blogging. And so I explored a little bit, and then I realized, a website would be a really great place to just kind of put a summary of all my research on bearded dragon care. Yeah. And, it would be mostly useful for me, so I could access it on my phone at any time when I wasn't sure about something. And, if someone else found it and found it helpful, great, because the research was a passion of mine. And it quickly became clear in the process of that it was very difficult to find good information on bearded dragon care on the internet. And the best sources were often buried in, very specific Facebook groups, certain forums, certain threads. There's just a lot of misconceptions and misinformation being thrown around on, by well-meaning but uninformed keepers, by websites that were just there to rank for the keyword but not actually provide good information. And especially with a common animal like a bearded dragon, it gets confusing very fast for somebody just looking for a quick answer to their question. Oh, yeah. Who, is not in the mood to sift through piles and piles of information. And because I'm usually in the mood to sift through piles and piles of information, I thought maybe this is something I can do to help out in the community. So it started with bearded dragons, and then I, as my my collection of reptiles increased, as it usually does for people. I would upload my research on them too to the site. So that's why there's a Doom Rules Boa guide on there. That's why there's a Blue Tongue Skink manual. It was actually the Blue Tongue Skink manual, I think, where Reptifiles really started to take off, because I was finishing up my undergrad at the time, and I had a technical writing professor who I had this assignment for the class. It was a 20-page paper. That was a graduation requirement, to write a 20-page paper. And since it was technical writing, it had to be a technical manual. Okay. And he said, okay, it has to be a technical manual, but it can be on literally anything you want. And so I just remember asking him, anything? And he says, yeah, as long as it's a technical manual, anything. So I'm like, what about pet care? Like a pet care guide? And he's like, yeah, that would work. And so I dove into it, and I just gotten my Blue Tongue Skinks at the time. And so I just went whole hog on this thing. I think it ended up being like 30 pages. And I was very proud of it at the time, because it was my best, most thorough care manual to date. And I spent so much time in my professor's office back then, just making sure this thing was perfect. And he saw my passion, and he also freelanced outside and consulted outside of his job as a professor. And he said, you could make a job out of this. Mm-hmm. And I'd never considered that before. And it just snowballed from there. That's what really got my gears turning. And that's what changed my life, was this one professor who said, I can see your passion here. You might want to consider making this your life.
Yeah, that's super.
And it was awesome. Yeah. And so ever since then, I've just been chipping away at Reptifiles to make it, first and foremost, a helpful resource for people who are, don't know better. So they go to Google for their pet care information because they don't know where else to go. And Reptifiles, my goal is for it to be there for them.
Yeah.
Near the top of the page, a reputable resource where if they only read one resource on pet care, that I can rest knowing that their animal is likely going to get a better start with its new home than with just about any other resource that the person could have used.
Right. So it's research-based. It goes into enough depth, and it's striving for excellent care and for a goal of a thriving animal rather than just survival, like we're saying.
Yeah, and modern information that is consistently getting updated based on new understandings of, heating, UV, visible light, all of that. Our understanding is changing every single year and evolving. And so I'm just doing my best to stay tapped in with the experts and aware of what's going on so that I can translate into common speech and get that information out to the people who need it.
Right. So it's up to date, but it's also accessible. That's
exactly.
It can be a hard balance to strike, but I think that's what you're doing. So it makes sense.
That is the goal, and it should get better because the site's being renovated. So it's going to be, it's going to rank better in search engines. We're getting rid of a lot of the clutter, and it is going to be easier to navigate and read, hopefully.
Cool. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So what's your timeline for that?
It's been a project for about a year now, I feel like. We're just chipping away at it. I'm hoping to have it live by the end of this year. We'll see.
Cool.
Because every single time, we've got one thing fixed, another thing comes up. And it's a gigantic site. So there's a lot of stuff to transfer over and to make sure the formatting's just right and the coding's working and all of that.
Right. Yeah, quite a project for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I just wanted to acknowledge quickly we've got super chat from Tarantula Collective, who's also, it's a member. He's a member who has been a member for 2 months. So I just wanted to shout that out. Thank you, Richard, for all you do for the channel. I love it. You've been a great supporter for a long time. And then we have a super chat from Ants and Pets. Been breeding blue death feigning beetles for about 2 months now, thanks to your videos and help from Reddit. Love your videos. So thank you, Ants and Pets, for that as well. And good luck with your blue death feigning beetles. I've got some larvae in the incubator right now. Hopefully they're...
It never occurred to me that you'd have to incubate beetle larvae, but it makes sense.
Yeah, it's basically, that's the pupation trigger for a lot of beetles from that clade. They need to hit a certain temperature. For blue death feigning beetles, 88 Fahrenheit is considered like that seems to be a threshold.
Whew, that's warm.
Yeah. So I have them, and the relative humidity is important too. So
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, right around 75 to 80% relative humidity, and that those two things seem to trigger them. So. I haven't seen. Do you have any invertebrate material on Reptifiles at all?
No, I don't have amphibian material, and I don't have invertebrate material. Eventually, down the road, when this site overhaul is finished, and I have I'm bringing on some more people on board to help manage Reptifiles. So I'm actually partnering with Happy Dragons in exchange for them helping me out. And as part of that, I'm really hoping that will enable me to reach out, to find and reach out to some experts on amphibians and invertebrates to build out, name pending, but amphibophiles and invertiphiles.
Cool. No, that's awesome.
Because it's become very clear that that kind of information is needed for those pets too. Right. And it makes sense given, those are the big three of the herpetological community. And I just don't know enough about them. They're different enough from reptiles that I definitely have no qualifications to speak for them. So I just need to find somebody that I can work with to that I can trust to use my formatting for consistency, and with the same natural history based forward thinking.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Because I really like the way you put your reptile material together, And I just thought, no, that would be really cool if there were some of that as well. So it sounds like you're that's on the horizon.
It is, yes.
Fantastic. That's so cool. So just to take kind of a jump in a different direction for a moment, this is a question I usually ask earlier on, and I kind of didn't get there. What are you keeping now as far as reptiles?
So I think it's 11 or 12 different species right now. I have viper geckos. They're the newest members of the collection. I really like micro geckos these days. I think they're some of the most perfect pets ever, as long as you're not big on handling. But even for handling, viper geckos are pretty slow. They're basically like a 4-inch long leopard gecko. And you can keep males together. As long as you give them enough space and there's no females to cause problems, males will get along as far as I can tell, which is awesome because I ended up with 3.
3 males.
Yeah, 3 males just randomly. But they're great little pets. I highly enjoy them. And they're sticky, which is so weird for a terrestrial gecko. They're sticky.
Oh,
yeah. And there's like no information on these guys, which is how I got suckered into buying them at a reptile expo. I look them up and I see nothing on them. I'm like, shoot, I can't pass this up.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So yeah, they're my current babies. I also have a northern blue tongue skink. He's a rehab case. I always take him with me to reptile expos to kind of show people what happens when you don't give a reptile the husbandry that it needs, and how when people see consequences, it really drives home the point.
Definitely, yeah.
And he's very cute and personable, so that helps. Cool. I have a Maruki Indonesian blue tongue skink. Let's see. I have a Sudan plated lizard. I have a ball python, a dwarf locality boa imperator, and let's see. Oh, my Euromastix J-Rai. And let's see, is that everybody in that room? Yep. Crested gecko, mossy leaf-tailed gecko, so Europlatus sicerae, and a colony of mourning geckos.
Very cool.
Yeah, so, and ocellated skinks. I have a group of 6 female ocellated skinks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I remember talking about those.
Yeah. They're really fun. I think they're very, very close to being a perfect pet reptile. The only thing is you can't sex them visibly. So, and they're, 8 inches long, so, and slender. So they're not the most like sturdy things, and they're slippery. So it's difficult to manually sex them as well. You kind of just have to like wait until they get to breeding age and figure it out from there based on interactions with other members. And by the time you figure out who's male and female, it's too late and you've got babies on the way because they're live bearers.
That's what I remember. Yeah. Yeah. So and that's one of the species that has shown up in quite a few different places in the world where it doesn't originally occur. So,
oh, yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the reasons why they're great pets is because of their hardiness. And usually where you have a hardy reptile, you have invasive potential. So I know for sure there's a population in Arizona that has established itself, apparently.
And I think I've heard of one in California, at least one in California, too.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. And some places in Europe where, yeah, I think there's
yes, they've been reported in a couple places in Europe as well.
We've got another super chat. Thank you, Theropod Hunter. Because day geckos seem to love nesocodon flowers. I can imagine they'd be great for enrichment. Well, I haven't kept day geckos at all, ever. So I can't say a whole lot. But since you were mentioning earlier these are native to their area and that they are the pollinators of them, that makes a lot of sense. Some of that natural history-based husbandry could relate to that. If someone were to do a deep dive into the relationship between these flowers, I bet they could find out some interesting things.
Yeah, I know nothing about this relationship personally, but there is an approach called biotope husbandry, where it's kind of the next level of bioactive, where you're not only creating a self-sustaining ecosystem, you're creating a piece of the animal's native ecosystem using the same plants and using like the same kind of CUC that they'd have over there if you can. Just getting as accurate as possible to really capture those intricate relationships that they would have in their habitat. So yeah, for those particular flowers, you're going to be able to observe a different behavior where you're essentially going to be keeping, the pet plant as well as the pet animal and see how they interact together. It's a different kind of cohabitation, but it's next level. Something I haven't really touched yet. I'm a little intimidated about it, if I'm being honest, but it is a really awesome project.
Yeah, I love it. I know that biotope aquariums were very popular and probably still are, but very popular a few decades ago. That people would say, okay, I'm only keeping fish that occur together in the same river systems and with the same plants that occur there. And I'm going to try to replicate the water chemistry of the river based on readings that have been done in that river and things like that. And so that has been, the concept's been around for a long time, but applying it to like herpetological care is fantastic. I'm glad that's coming into its own.
Yeah, usually, where you have a trend in the aquarium hobby, it makes its way into the reptile hobby. We've kind of got this trickle down effect from aquariums to amphibians to reptiles.
Yeah, that's true. The lighting, they were fiddling with the aquarium lighting a lot, I guess earlier than they were with reptiles, really, and other things too. You could go in and buy an aquarium kit, and now you can buy a vivarium kit and so on. When I was a kid, you couldn't do that. You walk into the pet store, a vivarium thing, just a kit didn't exist. You could get an aquarium kit. That was it. Yeah,
it's amazing how far both the fish hobby and the reptile hobby have come just in the last, from when I was a kid. And it's amazing. We've come so far, and yet we haven't. Betas are still being sold with little half-gallon plastic tanks or, vases to be kept in.
Right.
And that's being advertised as acceptable when it very much is not.
Right.
And so we've come so far, and yet we haven't. It's interesting to see how the old practices just stubbornly hang on.
Yeah. And some of it has to do with, my friend so-and-so had one that survived for 6 months in there, and so it's probably fine, when they don't realize how much, not only are they cutting the lifespan down, they're basically destroying the quality of life that would have been possible.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. The other day I was walking the hardware store and I did the rubbernecking thing because I thought I saw one of those betta vases in the hardware store. I was like, no, but I walked up close to it and saw, oh no, there aren't any fish in it. It's just a vase. Okay.
Yeah. I had 2 betas when I was a kid. I think I got them both for a birthday one year. And one of them consistently tried to jump out of his bowl. And I was so confused about why he was doing that. And now I know it's because he was miserable.
Yeah.
He was looking for better water.
Trying to get to, better quality of life somewhere. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hoping there's a puddle somewhere else that's better quality.
Yeah,
people
exactly.
are loving the term biotope husbandry. I love that that's becoming a thing. So cool. Challenging, yes. I think.
Yes, very challenging, especially finding the right plants. I mean, you're going to have to go international to find, and you're usually going to have to start them from seed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we have the selection of plants we have available in the hobby through things like dart frogs and whatnot. There's some cool stuff out there, but you're not going to be able to say, okay, well, this region of the world, I know there are 17 different things I can put in here. That's not generally what you're going to find.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love this. 36.
Oh, that's awesome. Just the beta? Wonder.
Cool. Yeah, I guess we'll see. Yotaro, let us know if it's just the
That's
beta.
Wonderful. Spoiled rotten beta fish.
Yeah, I do love to give betas nice things. Like my daughter had a beta when she was younger, and it had a 20-gallon to itself.
Mm-hmm.
Plants and things in there, but it was just that it was its own tank.
Betas are such beautiful fish too. They make amazing display animals.
They do, and they have so much personality for such a small fish.
Oh yeah, so much personality. They're tons of fun, and you can train them to do tricks.
Yeah, I actually taught a class using positive reinforcement to train bettas. I taught the students how to train bettas, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh, that sounds great. Oh, a pleco, a catfish, and 4 tetras. I love plecos. Plecos are some of my favorite freshwater aquarium fish. They are way fun.
Plecos are a lot of fun. I used to breed bristlenoses.
Okay.
It's been a while since I still have a few, but I don't really breed them. But they are fun fish. So I was going to ask. I'm going to pull up my questions here, make sure I don't miss anything, because I get to the stream where we're having fun chatting about everything, and then I realize, oh, I forgot to ask that and that and that, and I was going to ask all these things. So
I know the feeling.
Make sure I don't miss out here. Let's see. Pull that up. There we go. Okay. Is that it? Yeah, there it is. Okay. Oh, yes. So if you were to summarize the mission of Reptifiles, I think you've already basically covered it, but if you were to summarize it for someone, like an elevator pitch for Reptifiles, what would you say as the mission?
The mission of Reptifiles is to increase the standard of reptile care among pet owners. Yeah, that's it.
I think
I want to make the world a better place for pet reptiles.
Yeah, I love it. That's a good way to put it. That's excellent. Could you share some success stories that you have relating to Reptifiles? Like, you've mentioned kind of how it got a start, but have you had people come back to you and say, I'm so glad I found it and this is why, things like that you could share?
Usually after I help people out on emails, it's mostly email, occasional chat on social media. I don't usually hear back from people, which I would love to hear back from people more often, because it's nice to hear back from people, or hear from people saying, oh, I just got the X pet. Your site was very helpful for setting up. But occasionally I do have people who say, oh, I'm so excited that you just released, care information for this, or thank you for updating this. I've been, following your site for years, and I like to stay up to date. So thank you for helping me stay in the know. Or, I've had my reptile for, 4 years. He's doing great. And I try to do everything according to the care manuals or care sheets. And that's usually what I hear. I think I'd like to hear more of that about, especially, the longevity of the animals in 10 years or so. I'd like to start really hearing back from people about how the long-term welfare of their animals has been, because that's something that remains unproven.
Right.
I have had some interesting cases with people who have compared my information to others that they've received. Like, oh, I've been so confused. This really clarified for me. Or I always knew, I always felt like this was wrong. And then I found your site, and it makes sense to put these animals in, give them more space, give them an environment closer to their natural habitat, rather than these very detached from nature types of artificial environments. Not to say that it always has to replicate the natural environment, like down to a T. Biotope, it doesn't have to be a biotope. It doesn't have to be bioactive. There are ways that you can get around that just using like household items. So the enclosure almost looks like a pile of trash on the inside, but as long as it's functional for the animal, that's the goal.
Right.
But usually, we like them to look pretty, so that when the animal's hiding, you can still enjoy looking at it, which happens a lot with reptiles.
True.
But yeah, so most of the success stories are just, I've always felt this was wrong, or thank you for clarifying something I was confused on, or I do a lot of helping people with animals that are on the decline.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll come to me and they're concerned about something. And I'm not a veterinarian, and I'm very quick to direct people to veterinarians for things that need veterinary treatment.
Right.
But, there are a lot of things in reptiles that can be, if not treated, definitely helped. by fixing the husbandry. Most problems that occur with pet reptiles stem from something going on with the husbandry, whether it's poor shedding, appetite issues, weight loss, all of that. Usually there's something in the husbandry. And so that's when I'll work with somebody to say, okay, what does your environment look like now? How can we make it better? What's going wrong in the balance that your reptile is telling you is wrong? And so seeing every once in a while, people will come back to me and say, oh yeah, my animal's doing better now. I just have a question about this. And it's a great opportunity to inform an owner. And it's also just great to see an animal's life that, is potentially saved.
Yeah.
Maybe it would have, died from that. And the owner would have been left with such a sense of grief and confusion and this question why, and I can help answer that question why and make sure that they have more time with this beloved animal in their life.
Right. And there's a lot that's very rewarding to be able to understand being a part of that. That's
yeah. Some people don't like me for it. They'll be like, I've got this problem. And I'll be like, well, it's because your entire setup is wrong and this needs to be fixed right now. And it's going to be pricey, but you bought and like, this is not a cheap pet to begin with. Like, I don't care if you bought a $25 or $10 lizard, you got to pretend you just bought a dog, and a nice one at that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, and it's getting better over time, but I've noticed that, and it still has a long way to go.
Yes.
Like back when I was a kid, the disposable pet issue, whatever you want to call it, the idea that I'm going to buy this $3 lizard at the time, you could buy a $3 lizard or a $3 hermit crab or whatever it was.
Oh boy, hermit crabs.
And that the expectation was, I'm going to have it for a week, 2 weeks, whatever, a month, and I'm not going to give a thought to the idea that it's going to die after that and probably suffer in the meantime greatly because it's getting incredibly poor husbandry, if you can even call it husbandry. And that was just how things were for so many people, for so many different pets.
Yeah.
And even with things like rats or hamsters or budgies or whatever, back then, I mean, we know a lot more now for those animals than we did then. But even at that time, they were getting much better care than anoles or hermit crabs or whatever, frogs, anything that you could find in the pet store. It's just amazing to see how disposable that disposable pet mindset that still exists and still is bad among many people, but there are fewer people who suffer from that delusion about how pets work than there were. It's nice there's been progress.
Yeah, it would be nice to see progress going faster, obviously, but I mean, the progress that I've seen in the hobby just in the last 5 years has been very heartening.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of improvement, but like you say, it needs to go faster, but at least it's going.
Yes, at least it's going.
Yeah, and it's just some people will say, well, I only spent X number of dollars for this, and that's fine, but that's not what it's about. It's not what it's about at all.
If you want a cheap pet, get a garden snail from your backyard. I don't know what to tell you. Most animals need a lot more than you think they do.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to take your snake to the vet and it costs $600 and you only spent $75 on the snake.
I remember my boa. I had him in this enclosure and I hated the enclosure. I wanted to get him out of it, but projects build up and he's okay for now. It will happen just, in the next year. And the door was so it was a custom build based on something we found online. And the door swung open downward. It was a piece of plexiglass. So it was flexible and it kind of worked. And so it dipped kind of concave. And if it wasn't perfectly latched, it had 4 latches on this thing, 2 on each side. If it wasn't perfectly latched, my boa could press his way out of it. And I mean, he's a small boa. He was tiny enough to fit in the palm of my small hand when he was practically a newborn when I got him. And even now, he's like 5 years old, adult, and 4 feet long. So he's not a big boa by any stretch of the imagination.
Little boa, yeah.
Yeah. I wish I knew more about his lineage, but basement breeder, accidental auction buy. It's a fun story. But yeah, so he could press himself by flexing this plexiglass out. And once he figured out he could do this a couple of times, well, you know, boas, they would take a whole room if you could give one to them. They are very active snakes. And so once he figured that out, he would keep trying even when the door was latched. And so he developed a rub on his forehead from this, which turned into an abscess one day. Just, I feel like it popped up overnight, just big swelling. And I was like, ah! So kept an eye on it to see if maybe it would go away on its own. No, stayed around for, a few days later. I'm like, okay, we got to get this fixed. So I take him to the vet, see if we can lance it. And they say, actually, no, we'd probably have to surgically remove this thing based on these factors. And I'm like, okay, well, let's get the surgery scheduled. And so we do that. And that's why I have a care credit card, is for emergencies like that. And then, shortly before the surgery, he shed and it came right off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Good timing.
Yeah, really great timing. I was like, whew, really dodged a bullet there. And I actually called the vet to cancel the surgery to tell them what happened. And apparently they all cheered. They're like, woo!
Oh, good.
They were very happy for the snake. I have a wonderful vet. But it was just a funny story. But yeah, it definitely happens. That was going to be like a $1,000 surgery or something. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I've had some expensive vet visits for reptiles. Even recently, I had a snake after her birth. She ended up having a very high red blood cell count, and she had to get treated with antibiotics. And we had run a test panel, make sure we were ruling out what she didn't have, and so on. And it was fairly expensive.
Oh, yeah, all those tests add up.
A garter snake that that a lot of people would say, why would you bring a garter snake to the vet? And they're like, I love my snake. She needs to go to the vet. That's how it works. So,
it's part of the agreement. Once it's your pet, it's your responsibility. You're the steward of that animal, and it's your responsibility to take care of it to the best of your ability and to meet all of its needs.
Yeah.
Because it's not taking care of itself anymore. You are.
Right, exactly. Oh, this is something I saw you talking about light bulbs, and sources recently on one of your Instagram posts. Somebody has a question relating to that. Can we speak to that for a minute?
Yeah. So I did make a video on this recently. I think I uploaded it to Instagram and YouTube yesterday on this topic. The TLDR is, I'm not too worried. I firmly believe we are going to get an exception written in, mostly because we have ZoomEd. They do a lot of lobbying with governments to preserve reptile life support equipment and against legislation like this that threatens it. I mean, they have an obvious business interest in it, but it is nice to see a well-funded organization acting to preserve the hobby. It doesn't matter what their motivation is. The fact of the matter is that we need them, and they're doing great work by doing it. So I'm really not all that concerned. I do believe we're going to get an exception written in for pet-specific equipment. This might mean that this is likely to mean that things are going to get a little bit more expensive because, obviously when something's specialty, it gets increased in price because they can hike the prices. And sometimes the equipment gets harder to acquire as well for the manufacturing process. So that also does make the baseline cost of the product more expensive to begin with. So that is something that is likely to happen. but no, we're not going to lose this equipment. And the other reason why I'm so confident about this is because it's happened in the UK and in Europe, and they were worried about this too. They were able to get exceptions written in. As far as I understand, the legislation in the US is basically a copy paste from that European legislation. So I imagine the process to go very similarly. And, you know, with the US government being the way it is, if there's a business with a vested interest in preserving a product, the product is probably going to get preserved. So
that makes sense.
I think we're okay. There are things you can do. I mean, buying ZoomEd products is a good way to support their efforts right now. And fortunately, there's a lot of good products from ZoomEd, so that helps. And also, you know, Thomas Griffiths has a website, and on his blog is a letter that you can use as a template to send to the Department of Energy to kind of help add to the ocean of voices saying, please don't take away our reptile bulbs. There are some people, the most important thing right now is to make sure they have the information right. Mm-hmm. Because if we just say, oh, we need this for heat, oh, we need this for UV, they can easily come back with, well, you can use LEDs for UV because that's a technology that's emerging right now. And you can use, say, ceramic heat emitters, radiant heat panels for heat. And then you have to come back with, well, current technology for UV LEDs is not where it needs to be for the safety of reptiles. If you do this, you're going to have reptiles essentially getting cancer and dying from vitamin D3 overdose. Like it's that bad. No LED bulb on the market except for like one, if I understand correctly, and that one's manufactured by Reptile Systems, is ready to be used with reptiles. So regardless of what anyone's claiming, Exoterra, VivTech, ZoomEd, none of them are ready. Exoterra's TerraSky is only good for UVA and visible light. So you just turn off the UVB diodes and you use it as an additional source of UVA in the terrarium's light. And if you have a lot of different light sources, it helps to get additional UVA to balance out the spectrum and help the animal see more true to its ability to perceive, because a lot of reptiles can see UVA. And then obviously for heat, we need infrared A, and infrared A is only produced by incandescent, standard, and halogen bulbs. It is not produced by any lightless heat source that is technically more efficient. So we lose those, we lose a big part of reptile welfare.
Yeah. So we need to make sure that we do our part then. Like you said, since we have big companies lobbying for us, that's good, but it doesn't hurt to add to that ocean of voices.
Yep. Add to the ocean voices, make sure they're well informed about exactly what's going on. And that's why I love that Thomas made this template letter, because he is the guy, or one of the guys when it comes to reptile lighting. He knows.
Yeah, that's awesome. If any of the mods can find a link to that, can you say the name again? Make sure we get it right.
Thomas Griffiths. I believe it's Thomas KAS. Let me double check that right now. I can't find it right now, but yeah, it's Thomas Griffith's website. You can find the Thomas Kas, so the Thomas KAS on Instagram, and there's a link to his site there. Or you can go to my video on Instagram and or my account on Instagram, just Reptifiles, and there's a link in my bio that takes you directly to the letter.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad we were able to kind of get people in on that, and I'm glad. Thank you for bringing it up, to the OP for bringing it up. I can't remember who did that now, but for addressing that on your Instagram and your YouTube and right now. That's fantastic. We need to get people aware of these things. That we really
yes. There's just a bit of hysteria going on, and it's been going on for a while. I've seen for at least a couple of years now, like right before incandescent bulbs were removed from hardware stores like Home Depot and Lowe's in the US, there were people saying, oh, go bulk buy all of their halogen bulbs. So I saw people posting pictures of literally shopping carts full of bulbs
Oh,
I understand if you have a lot of animals, you do stand to save some money by hoarding like that. But like, just there are perfectly good reptile branded bulbs, and emptying the shelves like that is. We don't need to treat these bulbs like toilet paper, and we don't need to create a panic over this.
right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. But as long as we're aware of the issues and what we can do, that's the way to go. So I guess we're bumping up against our time here. Do you still have that class you need to teach today?
No, actually.
Okay.
I don't need to be there anymore.
Okay, so I don't have to get up right immediately.
No, fortunately.
Good. Because if it's okay to go a little longer, that would be fantastic.
Sure, I can stick around.
Okay, let's see. I know that there are some other herpetological projects you're working on in addition to reptiles. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, one that's kind of just like happened is I've got this little, I don't know what you'd call it, a bet against Dr. Jonathan Howard, the beardy vet down in Australia, about the relative size of the U.S. population of captive bearded dragons, or just bearded dragons in general. We don't have wild bearded dragons here. Because based on his research, he has never seen a bearded dragon above a total length of like 22, 23 centimeters.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a fact, or not total length, sorry, snout to vent. And I know for a fact I've seen bigger bearderies than that here in the US. I've seen some big 24-inch males, possibly bigger. Yeah. So he doesn't believe me, but he is intrigued. And, you know, as a former veterinarian and somebody who does field work with wild bearded dragons, he's seen a lot of them at this point.
Yeah.
And so I think knowing the total length of an animal is very important for calculating minimum husbandry standards. According to his calculations, for snout to vent length, the current 4x2x2 minimum meets my research for an enclosure that is at least 6 times as long as the animal's snout to vent length for lizards. Terrestrial lizards, that is my baseline rule, based on observations of smaller species, because I noticed there's this conflict, a disconnect, you could say. For smaller species, like, say, leopard geckos, we're saying, oh, you know, this 8-inch long gecko should be in a 40-gallon tank, a 36-inch long terrarium. That's a lot bigger than the animal itself. And yet, for larger species, you know, bearded dragons, blue-tongued skinks, tegus, what's the rule? 4 times SVL is for the length. And we usually adhere to that pretty closely here in the US. And that becomes, I don't like that inconsistency. And based on my own observations of keeping smaller species, the 4 times SVL rule is too small to enable the range of behaviors that an animal needs to express. And usually it throws a wrench in thermoregulation as well. Right. So 6 times SVL is my current standard. And so based on the size of bearded dragons in the US, we might have a different standard for American bearded dragons than Australian, oddly enough. So I'm collecting data on American bearded dragons, specifically on their preferably SVL and total length, and their weight, if I can get it. And I am going to put together a paper on my findings and probably get it published, try to get it published in the, I want to say it's the Responsible Herpetoculture Journal, the one out of Ukraine, because West Liberty University has a partnership with them, kind of.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and so I'll present that to Dr. Howard, and I didn't think this would happen, but I guess this kind of happens a lot in the scientific community, is this, well, I've observed this. Well, I think you're wrong based on my observations. Okay, prove it.
Let's get
So
the data.
that's my exciting project right now, is proving that the American population of bearded dragons has become bigger than their wild ancestors.
That is super cool.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there'll be a lot of reasons behind that, but it'll be interesting to find out what you discover.
Yeah, I mean, I love me a good big bearded dragon. You see a big, impressive looking male with this gigantic head. It's really fun.
Yeah.
It's just making sure that we're housing them properly.
Right.
I think there should be more breeding projects into messing with the size of our reptiles.
Mhm.
I would like to see more breeding efforts, less on morphs and more on downscaling large snakes.
Mhm.
So focusing, I mean, we have our super dwarf retics, we have our dwarf Burmese pythons, even though those are much harder to find. I would like to see an emphasis, because the smaller we can get these amazing snakes, the easier it is to keep them properly.
Right. Exactly.
It's just, you have a 16-foot snake and it's almost impossible to keep it properly in your average house. Like,
right.
you have to have an outbuilding or something.
Right. Absolutely. But if you have a 3-foot snake, you can do a lot more with that.
Exactly. And then, what if we made a lychee-sized crested gecko? What if we made those bigger, I would like to see some messing about with size, as long as the animals are still healthy, which I think would be less risky than with morphs, because you're increasing the scale of the animal itself rather than breeding for a particular color, which might be attached to genes that we don't know about.
Right.
And you see this in other species as well. You have horses. Yes, we have the miniature pony, which looks nothing like a horse, but you also have the miniature horse, which looks very much like a smaller version of a horse.
Right.
And you see this in nature all the time too. You have wild cats that look like kittens, but they're fully functional adults. Nature does this with hippos, with elephants. We see this all the time. And I mean, obviously, island gigantism, island dwarfism. We have all of these natural phenomena, which we totally could work with in captivity. And that's a project I would like to see happen more often, because if we want something fun, I would like to see something fun in a way that's beneficial to both the keepers and the kept.
Absolutely. And we see the model for that, like you mentioned, in the super dwarf retics. We took insular dwarfism, and then we're playing with a little bit more to make all these different morphs and so on available, but with that genetic basis for the smaller individuals, and it's the perfect combination. And the more we can do that with different species, the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or like my dwarf boa. He's got island dwarf genes in him. He's tiny for a boa, but he's got all of that boa spunk and personality in him. So he's in a 4x2x4 right now, this big old enclosure. He can climb to his heart's content and still wants to be let out. And it makes it easier for me to know that I'm keeping him well without putting too much pressure on me to use up more space than I have. Right.
I think that's a great thing to keep in mind. This is kind of a related topic that somebody's asking about. I want to approach this. I think we can both speak to this to some degree, in the general sense of putting small baby reptiles in larger enclosures. What have you found in the research you've done about that?
So I'm starting?
Yeah. If you could.
Okay. All right. So it's definitely possible. But there are two big buts here. One, baby snakes need to be well started. They need to be, because some breeders will sell a baby snake after it's had one meal and it's not well established. Right. You don't know if it's going to survive, really. That very vulnerable 3 months or so, depending on the species. You got to make sure it survives to that point. And it's not just a problem with snake breeders. You see this in lizard and tortoise and turtle breeders as well, less so with turtles. But like people selling tortoise eggs. Oh, gosh. Breeders are remember what I said about breeders being very good at survival. Right. When it comes to neonates, it is all about survival in that very delicate stage of life. You don't care so much about other things at that point. You are just making sure that they survive and that they are well established. They are healthy. They are eating. They are ready to become functional mini adults.
Mm-hmm.
Once they are established, here comes the second but of putting babies in big enclosures for me. The enclosure needs to be set up according to the baby's needs. Not an adult snake's needs, the baby's needs.
Right.
So it needs to have a lot of hiding places. That's what they need. And they need appropriately sized hiding places. And they need to be able to thermo and hydroregulate. Babies lose moisture very easily. Humid hides are critical for them. They may need overall generally higher humidity levels. Like with young tortoises, for the first several years of their life, usually they need higher humidity levels because their shells are growing so fast. They need to be able to keep their shells flexible, and that humidity really helps. And what do we see in the wild? Baby tortoises are spending a lot of time in burrows, predator avoidance, and it helps with healthy growth. Same thing for snakes. Baby snakes are all about predator avoidance. They're very hidey, very skittish. You got to give them places to hide because they're not going to feel secure enough to eat, to venture forth and look for food if they feel like something's going to eat them first. So providing lots and lots of hiding places, and then just making sure to watch that environment carefully, maybe even put a camera on that enclosure during night or day, depending on when it's going to be active, to make sure that it's doing well. So yes, absolutely can be done. I'm an advocate for it just because when you start a snake in a larger enclosure, you're less likely to get complacent with it later in life, and all of a sudden you have an adult snake in an undersized enclosure, which happens a lot because people just don't want to invest in the new enclosure, or the snake grew faster than they thought it would. Right. But again, to use my boa as an example, itty bitty baby, yay long, so like 16 inches or so when I got him, maybe less, probably less, honestly. And I threw him in a 4x2x2 and made sure he had lots of hiding places, and he was fine. He grew up great, and he's always had amazing muscle tone because of it. Never had a problem with eating. Now with certain, different snakes have different personalities. You might have to make adjustments based on the individual snake's needs, but I believe you can do it. You just have to do it right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I think that's great. And I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I think that you made all the points. As far as baby garters go, I think Yoth had also mentioned this. Baby garters are so minuscule that putting them in a front opening enclosure, you can't do it unless you make serious modifications to that enclosure. So not to say you can't put them in a big enclosure, but a front opening one is asking for trouble unless you make mods that make it escape proof, and you better make sure that it is.
Yeah, and that's, even for top and opening enclosures too, you have to make sure they can't get close to the top.
Yeah, exactly. Even
small colubrids, baby garters, all of those. I call them, when I explain it to people at expos, I say it's like water. If the enclosure is not watertight, it's not baby colubrid tight.
Yeah.
They will find a way out. And honestly, with most people looking to get a corn snake as a first pet for their kid, or a first snake for their kid, I say, just adopt an adult, get an ex-breeder, get something that's big. It's going to be slower, good to handle, and it's not going to escape, or at least not that easily.
Right. That's a good point. And with the baby garters, I don't put them in anything unless it's got gaskets and clamps on it. Like
Smart.
And then the ventilation, I put a lot in, not too much because the humidity, like you were saying, but plenty of enough ventilation. But I make sure that the holes are tiny. There's just a lot of them, and there's always that gasket clamp down because they are that way. Absolutely, they will flow right out of it.
Yeah, that is one argument for the smaller enclosures and tubs for those tiny baby snakes at first, is just because it's so hard to keep them safely any other way.
Right. But like you said, all the points you made, I totally agree. You have to think about what you're doing. It has to be a very intentional large enclosure that's specific to your baby, which may mean you need to make a lot of changes as the snake grows. So you may not upgrade the size of the enclosure very soon, but you're going to need to change the core and things like that as a snake, like the hides you were saying. A tiny garter snake's not going to feel comfortable in a hide that a 2-year-old garter snake is going to feel comfortable in. So very good points. Thank you for bringing that All right. Well,
Fortunately, when they're that small, you put in some leaf litter and you're basically covered.
yeah, because they are basically covered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So, thank you for staying on a little bit longer. I'm glad you were able to do that. I want to make
Yeah.
sure before we close down, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would like to say? Before I say that, I've just everybody. Oh, I'm sorry, knocked my microphone over. That reptifiles.com has been scrolling down at the bottom the entire time, so that you know where to go and check things out. But anything else you would like to say?
You asked about side projects, and actually, the topic of baby snakes in large enclosures coming up is one of them. I have this grudge match with a certain Reddit or subreddit. I am going to get me a baby corn snake.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to put it in a 4x2x2 enclosure, and I'm going to show that I can raise a baby corn snake in this thing without calamity.
That's awesome.
That is, scientific progress is based on spite. And I am determined to show the people who say it can be done that it can be done with a random baby corn snake, not selected, just make sure it's well established. That's my only criteria, that it's established, healthy, eating well. Everything else, I'm just going to throw it in a secure enclosure, and I'm either going to be proven right or I'm going to be proven wrong.
Yeah. Well, that's the kind of thing that I honestly wish more people would do on their videos. I like to do that kind of thing and want to do more of it on my channel, where you just say, okay, this is what popular opinion says, or this is what so-and-so says. Let's put it to the test. Let's document it all the way through and see what happens.
Exactly. Yep.
That's the way to do it. I love it. All right. Well, other places people can reach you besides your YouTube channel. You mentioned you have, of course, your Instagram, which is also Reptifiles. Any other social media platforms, or if someone wants to reach you for consulting, where should they go?
Yeah, email me at mariah@reptifiles.com. If you have questions, that's the place to go. I am technically on Facebook and TikTok, but I'm not very active on either platform, so it will take longer for me to respond.
Okay, so the email is probably the best way to directly.
Email, Instagram, YouTube. You can reach me on all three of those.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I would love to have you back again. I think one possible thing we could talk about is after you do this, keep this corn snake for a couple of years in this enclosure, we could say, here's what happened. I think that would be one of many topics we could talk about. So if you're up for that, that would be super cool.
Yeah, totally. And it is on the horizon. I just moved to a new place. So I'm going to get my reptile basement. I'm so excited. The animals aren't moved in yet. They're actually at the old apartment, which is being used as my external office at the moment since the lease isn't up. And meanwhile, so it's a totally unfinished basement. So we're at least getting electrical run down there, and then everyone's going to be moved over, and I'm going to finally have the space for taking on research fosters, so temporary animals that I have just for research purposes, and going to have space for projects like the Corn Snake Project. Maybe a bearded dragon. My husband really loves bearded dragons, so that might be his. And just a full-on office space for me. Hopefully, a little bit of a film studio where I can put together enclosures, take pictures, do videos. Kind of Serpa design style, but definitely not that fancy. I'm nowhere near his caliber. But show people, okay, here are all my materials. How would you put together a bearded dragon enclosure? How would you put together something for a green anole? That's something I would really like to do. And so I'm finally going to be able to have the space to do it. So
that's fantastic. Yeah. Congratulations on that. That's going to be great. All right. Well, thank you again, Mariah, for joining us. It's been great. We're getting lots of good comments about how much people love the stream, as did I. So thanks for joining us so much. And we'll have you back sometime.
All right. I'd love to be back.
Excellent. All right. Well, have a good night. And thanks again for joining us. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.